At Christmas 1964, the Beatles were the biggest band in the world. But instead of rewarding themselves and taking it easy, they spent 3 weeks dressing up and hunting the abominable snowman twice nightly in a pantomime variety show. In this video, I'll tell you all about the Beatles' second Christmas show, who was in it, what went on, and what the Beatles really thought about it. I'm Andrew from Parlogram Auctions, and welcome to the story of Another Beatles Christmas Show. It's well known how hard Brian Epstein worked the Beatles in 1964, and Christmas was no exception. If you grew up in the UK, you've probably at some point in your life, either as a child or a parent, been to a Christmas pantomime. Epstein recognised the power and popularity of a family Christmas show, and saw it as the perfect opportunity not only for the Beatles to make lots of money, but also to showcase some of his other acts. In 1963, the Beatles' Christmas show had been a huge success. Over 100,000 tickets had been sold during its 3-week run, from December the 24th to January the 11th, 1964, so it was a no-brainer to repeat the same formula in 1964. One of the highlights for the audience in the 1963 show had been when the Beatles performed a pantomime-style sketch. It was a kind of silent film scenario, where George, dressed up as a woman, was rescued by Paul from John the villain, whilst Ringo ran around scattering snow everywhere. Although the Beatles hated repeating themselves and these skits, they trusted Epstein completely and agreed to do it all again in 1964. Unlike the rest of the year, December 1964 started quietly for the Beatles. Both their new album, Beatles for Sale, and single I Feel Fine were about to be released and would go on to top the charts over the Christmas period. Ringo spent the first 10 days of December in hospital getting his tonsils removed, which was a media event in itself. George popped in to visit him a day before jetting off on a 10-day holiday to the Bahamas before returning on Saturday the 19th, just in time for the start of rehearsals, which began on Monday the 21st. The 1963 show had been held at the Finsbury Park Astoria, but a bigger venue was required in 1964, and that was the Hammersmith Odeon. Unlike most of the venues the Beatles performed at in the UK, this wonderful Art Deco-inspired theatre is still in operation today, although under its current sponsored name of the Eventim Apollo. As demand for the tickets was expected to be high, the box office opened on September the 7th, with tickets priced from 7 shillings and sixpence to 20 shillings, which was £1. Even adjusting for inflation, the highest priced £1 ticket works out at a very reasonable £21 or $27 in today's prices. Following on from John's successful book, he was given the opportunity to design the programme cover. John ended up designing both the front and back covers, which were credited as being from the Christmas edition of In His Own Right. This so-called Christmas edition was in fact just a regular copy of the book housed in a specially printed box, featuring a printed message from John on the front, along with a space on the back for the recipient's name and address. Very few of these survive today, and are currently selling for an easy $1,000. The pages inside the programme featured the usual biographies and photos of the artists, along with adverts from Beatle-approved companies, such as Fabulous and Boyfriend magazines. EMI used their ad to push their new tape records. These were twin-track mono reel-to-reel tapes of the Beatles albums. You can discover the fascinating story about those in another of our videos on this channel. Music publisher Dick James even got one of his own in too. As with the 1963 show, it was devised and written by Peter Yolland, and followed the same basic format. This consisted of musical numbers interspersed with comedy sketches and culminating in a full Beatles set as a finale. The Beatles had just 3 days of rehearsals, which began on December the 21st, before the opening night of its 20-date run at 7:30 p.m. on December the 24th. Apart from that opening night and December the 29th, there were 2 shows daily, the first at 6:15 and the second at 8:45. There were, of course, rest days, which were on the 25th and 27th of December, and the 3rd and 10th of January, with the final show taking place on January the 16th, 1965. The imaginatively titled Another Beatles Christmas Show didn't just feature the Beatles, but a host of popular and up-and-coming performers. Second on the bill to the Beatles were Freddie and the Dreamers, who'd had a great 1964 in the UK charts and were about to have an even better one in the US in 1965. Next on the bill were the six-piece band Sounds Incorporated. They'd backed Brenda Lee in Paris and had also played in Hamburg around the same time as the Beatles. However, their current day job was as Cilla Black's backing band. In fact, as soon as the Christmas show had ended, they were back on the road in another Brian Epstein production, backing Cilla and PJ Proby in their own show. Next on the bill was an 18-year-old singer named Elkie Brooks, who would of course go on to achieve great success in the 1970s and early 80s, but at this point had only recorded one single for Decca. Even at this stage, she'd already had a taste of the bright lights and big city when she'd accompanied the Animals on a trip to New York earlier in 1964. She could also be seen here, modelling clothes in the November 1964 issue of the popular teen magazine Rave. It's likely she came to the attention of Brian Epstein via her brother, Tony Mansfield, who was the drummer with Billy J. Kramer's backing band The Dakotas. Probably more at home on a bill with the Rolling Stones were the Yardbirds, who included a 20-year-old Eric Clapton. Although hitless at this point, they had just released their debut album 5 Live Yardbirds. Their breakthrough hit, For Your Love, wouldn't be released until March 1965. Not everything Brian Epstein touched turned to gold. The next act on the bill, Michael Haslam, was a case in point. A talented, if old-school balladeer, he released 2 flop singles before being let go and returned to his £15-a-week job on a fleshing machine at a tannery in Bolton. However, he had fond memories of his brush with the Beatles, John Lennon in particular, who had one night pushed him into the orchestra pit. The final group on the bill was the Mike Cotton Sound. They'd transformed themselves from a trad jazz group to an R&B combo. They would later provide the musical backing for Mary Hopkin on her debut Apple album Postcard in 1969. Last on the bill was Ray Fell, a comedian who'd begun his career on Merseyside's club circuit, before hitting his career peak with a 22-week summer season in Blackpool. The show's compere was the now disgraced Jimmy Savile, who no one on the cast got on with or liked. So what did the show actually look like? The Mike Cotton Sound were the opening act, and they kicked off proceedings by performing Georgie Fame's single Yeah Yeah, which was currently riding high in the charts. It was also their job to play incidental music throughout the show, by playing a few bars of appropriate music each time an act walked onto the stage. Michael Haslam followed them and sung the sentimental Christmas song Scarlet Ribbons, which had been a minor hit for Harry Belafonte in the UK in 1957. The Yardbirds were next, and they raised the tempo with a couple of R&B numbers from their live album, before the audience finally got their first glimpse of the Beatles. However, it was as they'd never seen them before, dressed as Antarctic explorers. There followed a weak and rather silly sketch in which they basically went on the hunt for the abominable snowman, who was in fact none other than the abominable Jimmy Savile dressed up. The sketch became little more than a bizarre mime, for the screams of the audience drowned out any attempts at delivering dialogue. A shot of them dressed up for this sketch is well known to record collectors, for it was used as the cover of the highly collectible Danish compilation album Hottest Hits in April 1965. Unsurprisingly, the Beatles loathed this sketch, vowing it would be the last time they'd ever do anything like this again. Freddie and the Dreamers brought the first half of the show to a close, with their unique performances of Rip It Up, Cliff Richard's Bachelor Boy, and Eddie Cochran's Cut Across Shorty, which was from their latest album, You Were Mad for Me. After the interval, the show opened up again with the Mike Cotton Sound, who then remained on stage to back Elkie Brooks. She was then followed by a short set from Sounds Incorporated. You've got to feel sorry for poor Ray Fell. Imagine trying to do a comedy routine in front of a theatre of screaming teenagers desperate to see the Beatles. I'm sure not a word of his act was heard by anyone. With Ray gone, it was finally time for the main event, and the Beatles' 11-song set brought the evening to a climax. They opened with Twist and Shout, followed by 4 tracks interspersed with Can't Buy Me Love from their new Beatles for Sale album, I'm a Loser, Baby's in Black, George's Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, and Ringo's Honey Don't. Then came both sides of their new single, I Feel Fine and She's a Woman, followed by 3 great songs to end with, A Hard Day's Night, Rock and Roll Music, and Long Tall Sally. Sadly, no footage or recordings of the show survive, but a radio interview recorded backstage one night does. Unusually for this period, it's George who's on the best form, and his legendary dry wit shines through. Here he is describing how the show's going, with John and Paul chiming in too.
It's great, it's good fun. There's lots of people all come in, which is nice. And we're having a good time, with Freddie and the Dreamers and Yardbirds and everybody. It's good.
Which do you prefer mostly, doing the sketches or doing your numbers?
I think doing our numbers best.
The sketches are lousy.
Yeah. The sketches this year aren't as good as last year's. But, we didn't really have enough time to make them any better. So, but we prefer doing our act now at the end.
Do you play the same numbers every time, Paul?
Yes, every night. Same numbers. Twice a night. Get used to them after a bit. But it's one way of learning them, you see.
Saves rehearsing them, does it?
Yeah. They're all new numbers, nearly.
Are you playing the ones off your LP?
Yeah, we're playing some off our LP and singles and things. We just mucked in and did the tunes that we think people would like to hear.
It's also an opportunity to read out fans' letters and dedications, including this one read by George.
The best record the Beatles have ever made is A Hard Day's Night because of the fab playing at the end of the record by George.
Right.
Wow, thanks, and it's from Linda Darby, 2 Ullswater Place, Cannock, in Staffs. Thanks a lot, Linda Darby of 2 Ullswater Place, Cannock, Staffs.
Wow.
What was the number again?
Which 2? No, the song. A Hard Day's Night.
Oh, let's play it.
As well as doing shout-outs to fans, the Beatles are invited to do their own too. This prompted a wave of nostalgia for the Quarreymen days, starting off with George remembering his partners in crime at the Liverpool Institute, schoolmates Arthur Kelly and Tony Workman, with some advice from Ringo thrown in for good measure.
Yeah, I'd like to send one to the 2 mates of mine who were at school and always getting kicked out with me, called Kelly and Workman, and it's Tony Workman and Arthur Kelly, if you're listening.
Get a job.
Hello, how are you, and all the best.
In fact, George wrote a Christmas card to Kelly and his family that very Christmas, which shows how close they really were. In this next one, Paul says hello to his Liverpool Institute mate and fellow quarryman, Ivan Vaughan.
I'd like to say hello to Ivan Vaughan, who used to go to school with me, and his birthday's the same day, and he also used to play T-chess bass with the group. He just got married recently, so to Ivan, his wife, hello there.
John's choice to remember his Quarryman colleague Nigel Wally is interesting, for it was Wally who was with and saw his mother Julia being knocked down and killed. John reportedly refused to speak to him for some time after the incident, but it seems 6 years later it was all water under the bridge.
I'll send a message, Chris, to my old mate Nigel Wally, who used to live just by us, who also used to play with us at one time when we were a skiffle group. He used to play double bass, only it was a box bass. Oh, and his dad, was a big policeman in Liverpool. Anyway, hope you're all right, Nigel. He's a golfer, you see, and love to your wife, and see you soon. Ta-ra, well.
John also gave a shout out to another ex-quarryman, his old mate Pete Shotton.
Oh, well, I'll send a message to my old pal Pete Shotton up in Liverpool. He used to go to school with me, and he also played washboard for the group when we were the Quarreymen. See you around, Pete. Give me love to your wife, eh? Ta-ra.
Finally, George makes a heartfelt dedication for another schoolmate and band member.
Hello. I'd like to send a request to somebody who I used to go to school with too, and he used to play bass in the group, Paul McCartney. And if you're listening, Paul, at work, it was great going to school with you, and we had a nice time, and I'd like to play a nice one called Love Me Do.
After the show had ended on January the 20th, Ringo made up for lost time he'd spent in hospital by proposing to his girlfriend Maureen Cox in the Ad Lib Club. Their wedding followed on February the 11th. John went with Cynthia together with George Martin and his wife on a skiing trip together to St Moritz, before returning on February the 7th. The next major event took place on February the 18th, when they reconvened at Abbey Road for the start of the Help sessions, but that's another story. I hope you enjoyed this festive offering and that you'll like, subscribe and come back again for more Beatles stories. In the meantime, I'll be busy filling up the stockings in our web shop with Beatles goodies, which you can find at parlogramauctions.com. But that's me done for this one, so I'll say thanks for watching and Merry Christmas.